Brexit. What happens next? Theresa May won't get her deal passed through the UK Parliament. There are reports that up to 81 of her own MPs are saying they won't back her, meaning she won't have a majority in Parliament to get it through. We've known this for a while, but why, and more importantly, what will happen if the deal is rejected? There are a number of things that could happen. Today I'm going to assess the likelihood of each.
Theresa May promised strong and stable leadership. She has brought weakness and uncertainty. If she has an ounce of self-respect, she will resign.
So following a massive defeat in Parliament, there will be calls on the Prime Minister to resign. She may well step out of the doors of number 10 and announce her resignation. But this is very unlikely.
And am I going to see this through? Yes.
Because May has promised to see the Brexit process through, and also because the Tories have to be seen to deliver Brexit to win over the voters in the next election. Now, March the 29th, 2019 is written into the legislation, meaning the UK has to leave the EU on that date at 11 p.m, unless they get the EU to agree an extension on Article 50. But if we've not asked for an extension and we haven't agreed a deal, then by 11 p.m. on the 29th of March 2019, we could leave the EU without a deal. If everything else is keeping May out of power, it's timing to get something done before the 29th of March that's keeping her in. That doesn't mean she doesn't have political opponents who want her out.
We are a democracy, and that's why these splendid people can shout away, because we believe in the right of free protest. And that chap's a great man. He was up at Birmingham and he's everywhere. And that's what democracy is about. You make your case, and then you have the vote and you accept the result. Many people of the 48%, as shown by opinion polls, accept the result even though they did not like it. And that's the nobility of our democracy, and that what we have voted for should be implemented, and the Prime Minister is not doing that, and that is why I have no confidence.
If a Prime Minister refuses to leave by choice, then they are forced out by a vote of no confidence. This happens once the Prime Minister reaches a percentage of letters. In this Prime Minister's case, it's 48. Now what's interesting is that although over 25 MPs have publicly stated they have sent a letter in, there are some prominent hard Brexiteers, such as Boris Johnson and David Davis, that still haven't.
And I hope you will join me in urging our friends in government to deliver what the people voted for. To back Theresa May.
That's because they want to change the policy, not the person. And for them, a leadership challenge would not assist in changing the Brexit deal before the March 2019 date. In fact, it would only delay the process. Also, a leadership challenge involves putting candidates up against May, and then MPs and party members voting on their favourite candidate. But there's no guarantee that Theresa May would lose. Finally, a leadership challenge puts an unelected leader in the role as Prime Minister, giving Labour the ammunition needed to call for a general election. So a leadership challenge is still unlikely. So if Parliament can't agree on May's deal, does that mean there will be a point where the government starts preparing for a no deal? Well, 11 p.m. on the 29th of March 2019 is when the EU treaties will stop applying to the UK. That was already agreed in the Withdrawal Act, and under the same Act, ministers would have 21 days to make a statement to the Commons on how to proceed. Now, the government would then have a further 7 days to move a motions in the Commons, allowing MPs to express their opinions on the matter. Crucially, though, Parliament wouldn't be able to stop the government's new proposal. The motion the government comes up with would probably not be amendable. Parliament wouldn't have the legal force required to stop the UK leaving the EU institutions without a deal. The government does have formal preparations for a no deal, but what's interesting is that those formal preparations have not yet started, because they believe they can get May's deal through Parliament. This is interesting because there is no majority in Parliament either in support of May's deal or a no deal. So if we can't agree a deal by March 2019, the term crash out really does apply. Ireland, trade and tourism become extremely uncertain areas. This uncertainty would make the pound fall dramatically, and therefore MPs and government ministers would be looking to make more default proposals in the event of a rejection of May's deal.
The reality is that Parliament's gridlocked. It won't support the Prime Minister's deal. It also, though, won't support a no-deal outcome. I'm sure that that will be voted against by MPs. And what it underlines is that the only way we can really break that deadlock is to give that final choice back to the people. And the reality is there are now 3 different deals that will be on the table for the British public. The first deal is the one that we've already got from the EU. The second deal is the one that the Prime Minister's finishing off. The third deal is essentially to leave as planned, but on WTO basic trade rules, and then try and do a trade deal at some point quickly afterwards, however long that would take.
Among the proposals is a second referendum, but the government has openly rejected this proposal, and legislation has to be put forward by the government and voted on by MPs. There is currently no majority in favour of a second referendum either, with only 8 Tories, 44 Labour, the SNP and the Lib Dems publicly favouring a second referendum, making 99 MPs in total, well below the 326 MP majority needed to pass an act. In fact, the only majority there is in Parliament is to remain in the customs union and single market. Staying in the customs union is an easier sell to constituents, because without it we cannot have a free border in Northern Ireland, but staying in the single market means accepting free movement of people, a much harder sell to Brexiteers. If it got to the point where we were closer to March 2019 and no deal had been agreed, the government would have to propose extending Article 50, which would probably get passed, given even hard Brexiteers want this opportunity to negotiate a new deal.
To scrap the Commission's constitutionally abominable Northern Ireland backstop, use the otherwise redundant and miserable implementation period to the end of 2020 to negotiate the Super Canada FTA, Free Trade Agreement, to invest in all the customs procedures that we will need to ensure continued frictionless trade, and to prepare much more vigorously than hitherto for coming out on WTO terms.
But number 10 has again openly rejected this proposal. Another idea is a negotiated deal in which the UK asks the EU for a paid 1-year extension of membership before leaving on World Trade Organization rules. Again, this would struggle to pass through Parliament, as they would be asking to vote blindly on an uncertain status for the UK. Amongst the changes to the Brexit deal the government ended up negotiating would be changes to the Irish backstop to ensure the UK can decide our end date and a probably more extended, legally certain future trade agreement. But all this debating and legislation and amendments will take time that we do not have before the 29th of March 2019. Hence why an extension on Article 50 is probably more of a likely outcome. If, after an extension on Article 50 had expired and a deal has still not been agreed, that's when we might be facing a leadership challenge and a possible general election.
Having got agreement yesterday in this conference hall, getting one in Brussels should be a piece of cake. If you deliver a deal that includes a customs union and no hard border in Ireland, if you protect jobs, people's rights at work and environmental and consumer standards, then we will support that sensible deal.
If Labour were in power, they'd be trying to get a deal that keeps us in the customs union and agrees to their 6th test for Brexit. Having said all that, should they not be able to find a deal with the EU that agrees with both parties, they have said that all options are on the table, meaning they will hold a second referendum. But when do you think Brexit will end? Join in the debate below and subscribe.